Chronicle podcast. I'm Casey Hughes, and I'm here with my good friend Jackson Shen and my podcast partner Matt Starsville. Today we are joined by county basketball star Caleb Rexroad. Caleb, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm a senior at Loudoun County High School. I've known Casey and Jackson for a few years now. I've played basketball with them. Looking for a pretty good basketball season this year, and decided that we're at least going to be able to play 14 games in the playoffs, which is how it's scheduled as of now.
So I figured we'd jump straight into our first question. And I think all of us on this podcast know you were a multi-sport athlete, kind of a star in all the sports you played. But at what age did you realize that your main sport was basketball?
That would probably be about 8th grade. Basketball actually was not my main sport for most of my life. Since the age of 5 or 6, baseball was my main sport. I played on a very competitive travel team, and I was working eventually to play baseball in college. That was my goal. And then of middle school years, I started playing basketball a little bit more. I started becoming a little bit more athletic, and once I kept training and I became somewhat of the player that I am today, I realized that I wanted to pursue basketball a little bit more, and I put a lot more time and effort into it than I had in the past.
Yeah. What kind of made you decide to put that time and effort into basketball over baseball?
Truthfully, I got a little tired of baseball. I had played it so much, and basketball, I hadn't really overplayed it, and I had a lot more joy playing basketball at the time when I made that decision than I did playing baseball. And so far, I think I've made the right decision. I still enjoy playing basketball every time I'm on the court.
Yeah.
So kind of going on from, how the transition from playing baseball to basketball, going into your freshman year, what are kind of your expectations for, trying out for the team?
Yeah, so freshman year was a lot about figuring out kind of what I wanted to do and what I wanted to pursue in high school. So in the fall, I actually ran cross country, and that kept me in shape for basketball, but it took up a lot of time, so I wasn't able to work all day on basketball like I kind of wish I could have. But going into the season, I really had no idea what team I was going for. I would have just been happy to make the freshman team, and the 3 coaches on tryout day pulled me aside and said I might have a chance to play varsity, but I ended up joining the JV team, the junior varsity team initially. And then in the middle of the year, I was eventually pulled up to varsity. So going into the season, I really didn't have that many goals, and it was just an opportunity to learn and figure out where I was with my development in basketball.
And what was that transition like from JV to varsity? Was there any challenges that you faced?
Yeah, definitely. It's obviously a completely different level of basketball. There's a lot more pressure going into it, especially as a freshman. You've never really played in front of some of the crowds, and at the time that I was pulled up to varsity, I was immediately given a decent amount of minutes, and it was in a point of the season where it was all district play, so every game that we played mattered towards our playoff seeding event and who we would be playing in the playoffs. So it was pretty stressful, but after a couple games, became a lot more comfortable, and I got used to the level of play that I was seeing at the varsity level.
When you moved up to varsity, were there any mentors that were on the team already that kind of helped guide you, through that experience?
Definitely. There were that year we had a lot of seniors, and I became friends with all of them. I'm still friends with a few of them, but in particular, there were three players that helped me a lot my first 2 years in varsity, and that was Derek McCandless, Joe Alexander, and Matt Anderson. They were all kind of leaders on the team, and they just made it a lot more comfortable. They made sure I was understanding everything we were running through in practice, and I wasn't being left behind off any new stuff and off the more extreme level of basketball that I was playing.
So obviously, as we get into this year, Matt Anderson, as you mentioned, was one of your mentors. He's now gone off to Shenandoah. How do you think that will change your role going into this season?
Obviously, I think as most people who have heard of county basketball know, Matt was a staple of our team. He was probably one of the best point guards in the entire state of Virginia. So we kind of are looking to fill that point guard spot. We have Jimmy Daughtry, and he's solid so far. But as for my role, I'm definitely going to be handling the ball a lot more. I got a lot of my points the last couple of years off of at the half-court offense and plays set up for me and stuff. This year I'm going to be the person facilitating a lot more, and I'll be bringing it up a lot more than I have in the last couple of years.
Does that also change your preparation or mindset going into games?
Definitely. Especially last year, or 2 years ago, we had Joe and Matt took most of the shots. Last year we had Matt and Mark who took most of the shots, and I took the third most shots those past 2 years. This year both of them are gone, obviously, and I'm going to be the person now that has to be more aggressive and be willing to take some shots that I probably wouldn't have taken the last couple of years, but now I'm kind of that guy, and I have to be ready to take up that role and be more aggressive and go into that role head first, really, rather than shying away from some of the shots that I should be taking.
Yeah. So has that changed your training at all? Obviously, you're going to have to get a little bit better with the ball and a little bit better off of ISO and getting your shots rather than all half court like you have been doing.
Yeah, so like you said, a lot more ball handling. Conditioning, that hasn't really changed. I've always tried to stay in shape. But yeah, a lot more ball handling, a lot more shooting, especially off the dribble. A lot of moves into shots is what I'm going to be changing in my game this year.
A lot more pick and roll offense for you then?
Yeah, so with Nate and Kiefer and George, we're going to have some very solid bigs that will be able to help facilitate that pick and roll action. And you have a big target going in, but you also have the option to obviously drive and make your own shot. So looking forward to that dynamic this year.
Yeah, as we know, when Matt was there, the offense was a lot of fast pace, a lot of fast breaks. Does that change with him gone?
We don't want it to. We've been working in our limited practice time this year so far to make sure everybody's staying in shape and keep that fast pace going, because it's worked for us brilliantly those last couple of years. And as for my role with that fast break, like you mentioned earlier, I'll be bringing the ball up a lot more during those fast breaks now, rather than being the one that maybe leaked out a little bit or was catching the ball from Matt on those fast breaks. But we definitely do still want to get out and run as much as we can.
Yeah. So obviously this season is going to be different from any other. It's shorter. We have the pandemic going around, so it's going to change some of the preparation and the way that fans can kind of interact. So I've noticed that Coach Alexander always brings a lot of energy to the games. How do you think you guys are going to feed off his energy this year rather than the fans? Or
yeah, like you said, he's a very energetic guy. He's very passionate about his coaching. And one thing he's made clear to us so far this year, especially once the schedule came out and we saw how short it was, is that in years past, those first 5 or 10 games, it's kind of like see where you are, see where you have to improve. It's not as urgent as the second half of the season and you have time to build and improve and come together as a team. It's completely different this year because those first 5 or 10 games are your entire season, basically. So you have to come completely prepared, completely energized, and not be making those mistakes that you normally would be able to make in the first half of the season.
How do you think it will be like playing, not in front of the Riot, or whatever the new name will be called? Because last year the team fed off that, a great deal. So how will that affect play, or will it, be business as usual?
We're going to try to keep it business as usual. It will be disappointing not being able to have that fan base that we had last year because, like you said, Matt, we really did feed off them, and they made it so much more exciting and eventful to play, I guess, especially in some of those rivalry games where they really showed out for us. But we have to adapt to how it will be this year, and like you said, that means business as usual. So we're gonna have to find that energy from ourselves and just from our desire to win.
Last year, you guys really fed off the crowd. I noticed in all 3 times or 4 times that you played Loudon Valley. So this year it's going to look a little different playing Loudon Valley. Trent Dawson is gone. A lot of the top names from district play are gone. So how do you think the district competition is going to look?
I think a lot of the schools, like you said, are losing people. So a lot of the situations that I'm in, that I'm with Matt and Mark leaving, are similar to what a lot of guys that in those other schools, a lot of rising seniors are facing as well. So I think you won't see a drop in the level of competition. You'll just see a lot more guys stepping up for their various teams that have had limited roles in years past, and they're going to be the people that are the leaders of their teams now and that are taking those important steps and those important roles that seniors last year held. So I think the competition will be just as good as it has been in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and it's not the same thing as the NBA bubble, but people called that like the great equalizer because there were no fans. There was a lot of people that stepped up, and that's very similar to what you just said.
Yeah, this is basically where you can figure out who can actually play basketball and who can't play basketball because you don't have some of the people that only feed off the crowd and that really get their energy from that. So you're going to see people's true skills coming to play.
Yeah, and what I really think is going to happen is there's not going to be any hiding from Coach Alexander. When you make a mistake, there's no crowd to kind of block that out. There's nothing. He's going to be right there, so that dynamic's really going to change.
Yeah, he can be pretty loud when you make a mistake, and like you said, normally you can hear a few hundred or a couple thousand people blocking that sound out. This year you're going to hear it in full effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for this off season, of course, training was a little limited through COVID, but what were certain drills that, prepared you the most for this upcoming season?
Well, like Casey said, I'm going to be handling the ball a lot more this year, and I'll be taking a lot more shots. So the thing that I make sure in whatever drill I'm doing is that I'm doing it at game speed. That's the only way you can really improve and carry over those skills that you're learning on into the games that you're going to be playing. So I did a lot of cone work, I would use basically anything that I could as fake defenders or obstacles. I would use cars in my driveway, different chairs, different cones that I had, and I really just tried to replicate as much of a game situation as I could, and also replicate any previous training that I'd done in an actual gym.
So obviously in this podcast we touched on how multiple schools have had players leave, like Matt Anderson and Mark, Avery Nance and Trent Dawson. They all left. Where are you in your college recruitment or college process?
So I've been talking to 2 schools a pretty good amount, and that's really because I have 2 schools set on my mind that I want to go to. I want to attend the Air Force or the Naval Academy. So I've been talking to both of those 2 coaches a lot this last year and a half, and it has seen a little bit of a halt with COVID just because I had plans for them to come and watch my games this summer, but no coaches were allowed at any of our travel events. So it's been tough, but I am talking to those 2 schools, and I do ultimately want to go there, whether that means I'm playing basketball or not. But if I'm allowed to play basketball there, and if the coaches see me as good enough to play basketball there, I'll definitely take them up on that.
Yep. So we're going to kind of wrap this up, and thank you for joining us again, Caleb.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you to Jackson for setting this up, and great job, Matt.
Thank you.
My co-host. So that's the end of the first Captain's Chronicle podcast. See you guys next time.